is about economic mobility and economic development. You can't be in all places at once, and so they have done a phenomenal job. We also launched a pilot of a library tech academy where Cheyenne and I trained librarians to make them feel more comfortable when patrons come in asking them about technical stuff and technology in general. They're more comfortable helping them. And I always love to work with librarians, so we had a blast with that program. We also offer remote work certification as part of a workforce development kind of toolbox. And I'm really, really happy that we are currently working with 5 counties in Indiana funded by the Duke Foundation that they're going to have digital inclusion plans rolling out soon. Cheyenne is spearheading. She's my coworker here, my colleague. And we also have, to the best of my knowledge, the first 2 regional digital inclusion plans that are woven into economic and community development. Social justice is there, but we framed it slightly different around economic development to really capture their attention. Not that social justice does not capture their attention, but many rural leaders do understand economic development, workforce development. Social justice, not necessarily. So that was our approach, and we are going to unveil those in the next couple of weeks. And then about economic mobility, last, because I know there's a data question there, we developed an individual digital capital survey that clearly shows the differences in income and savings and use between groups in a community or a region, and we use those in turn to inform the planning process.
Thank you. And I'm going to take moderator's privilege here and just mention we did do a Google certification process in Chattanooga, and really we looked at all the things you're talking about. Do folks need childcare? What's the transportation need? How can they participate in training if they have to work 2 or 3 part-time jobs to pay the bills? What are the barriers, and how do we remove them? And what happens when we remove the barriers? And so we provided childcare. We ran the program in the building next door to the housing authority where all the participants came from. We hired a moderator that they knew and felt comfortable with. We gave them a wage replacement. And we trained folks, and they got Google certifications and some other certifications. And folks were getting jobs doubling or tripling their salary, right? And so we did do digital skills training first. We run the Tech Goes Home program, and we ran that in advance, and everybody got a computer and training and home access. But I think there's a need, a desperate need, to really think about what are those barriers and how are we addressing them. So I'm going to ask Roberto a data question, because I have used your data a lot. And if you haven't read the data that he has shared, you really should, because it's very helpful as we're writing grants or as we're trying to examine what's happening in our communities. So I would love to have you tell us a little bit more about that, and how could folks connect with that data?
Sure. Thank you for the shout out. So I just find it funny because we developed the Digital Divide Index in 2016. And recently, a federal agency last year tweeted that it was the first ever digital divide map, and of course I giggled. And I replied, but that didn't get any traction on that. But data, as you know, data is not where it needs to be. As practitioners, those of us on the ground, digital literacy, digital skills, how do you measure that to begin with, right? So we are very limited in that aspect from the get-go. But with the Digital Divide Index, this data set was developed to help practitioners and community leaders kind of decide or get a better picture of their community on 2 fronts, on the infrastructure adoption side and on the socioeconomic side. So we know there are certain socioeconomic characteristics that affect tech adoption, and those are typically considered after you're trying to do something. So we wanted to change that dynamic and put it up front so people or community leaders would not only focus on the infrastructure adoption piece, but why, under which context is that taking place? And so we added the socioeconomic score to that. I can send you the URL later, but now there's a lot of other information out there, and which is awesome. We also developed a digital distress measure. We also developed, NTIA came up with their map. i3 Connectivity Explorer. There's a lot of dashboards out there, folks. It is not nearly close at what it was in 2016 when I started doing more in-depth research in this. So I'm glad you're using the data. Let us know. We're gonna publish the new version of it in March, April of the 2020 version, and we have gotten hundreds of requests from nonprofits, universities across the country to use it. So I'm glad you're finding it useful.
It's always helpful. So I'm going to ask a question of Joe. It's really wonderful to have you here today, Joe. As the new CEO of Byte Back, I know you're planning to move forward to Byte Back 2.0. Can you tell us what it is and why you're doing it?
No problem at all. Byte Back, this is VIP information. So. But I'd be remiss if I didn't do another special shout out to Professor Elizabeth Lindsay, who hey, good to see you, Elizabeth. And she set us up pretty well. Really, I call it an alley-oop. She tossed it up, and now we're dunking it. Byte Back 2.0 looks like approaching individuals and meeting them where they are, right? There is no one-size-fits-all to this digital divide problem, and we need to understand that. We need to understand where someone is, and we need to understand where they want to go before we force them into a path that they may not even succeed in. Byte Back 2.0 also looks like examining and establishing clear lanes, clear business lines. Basically, we've always served the Latinx community, but we've never had a Latinx affairs department. We do now, right? We've always served returning citizens, but we've never had a program specifically designed to help returning citizens. Now we do. Reentry, Enhancement, and Upliftment Program, the REUP program. We've always helped vets, but we've never had a program specifically designed. Now we have Byte Back Vets, veterans enhancing their technological skills, helping unemployed veterans get back to work. So we have several new business lines that we're launching in order to focus. One thing I'll tell y'all, this is super VIP. Of course, Elizabeth is going to be forever tied to Byte Back, and we love her for that. And we also know that she's the new CEO of Urban Alliance. We're launching 360 Fellows, right? Our 360 Fellows Digital Navigator program. It's an intergenerational training program that empowers youth with digital literacy, digital tech skills, so they then can go into senior living facilities, retirement homes, you name it, community centers, public, wherever they can, set up pop-up shops to help seniors learn how to access email, telehealth, online banking. We have so much planned. I don't want to tell you too much because Byte Back 2.0 is launching pretty soon. But I tell you, for Byte Back, we're looking at our theme for the year and for the next 3 to 5 years is SRI, Solutions, Results, and Impact, right? Our goal is to provide solutions for the communities that we serve, also to provide results for our program participants, and last but not least, make sure that what we're doing is creating sustainable impact in the communities that we serve. It's not enough to just get someone a job. It's important for us to ask, data, right? Sustainable impact. It's important for us to ask, where are they 3 years after they've had an interaction with our organization? Are they better off or worse off as a result of that intervention? And if they're worse off, we obviously have to change the way we do things. But Byte Back 2.0 looks like making sure that, I'll tell y'all another secret. I live my life by this African proverb. It says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Byte Back 2.0 looks like us going together so we can solve this problem. And I'm truly inspired by all the faces, all the organizations. We're all collectively solving a world problem. And together, we can definitely make a difference. So for donations, please go to, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Thank you, great question.
I was going to say, Joe, you do realize this is live streamed, like,
Even better.
so all the VIP information is out there everywhere.
Well, that means everyone's VIP.
There you go. And I really look forward to those announcements. I think that would be really helpful for all of us to hear more about what you're doing. I'm going to ask Liz a question. You created an awesome tool that everyone in this space really needs to know about. Can you explain what it is and how we all might engage with it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. So if anyone wants to follow along, I have a URL for you. It's a vanity link, so it's nice. It's not like a bunch of gibberish. If you want to go to LISC, LISC.org/rural EBB, it'll take you to this website, and it says Emergency Broadband Snapshot, and you can click this button that says Open the Map. So I and my very, very helpful colleague, I had no idea how to do GIS at all before he helped me, at LISC Research and Evaluation, Spencer Anderson, have worked together to create a tool mapping national EBB enrollment by eligibility. So each zip code, every zip code in the United States, including Puerto Rico, is color-coded by enrollment. So, and if you look at that map, you'll see that a majority of the country is blue, which means that 24% or less of the people that are eligible for the EBB program are enrolled. In fact, the average nationwide is 17%. And if you, I always think this context is helpful because I'm very new to government aid programs, but enrollment in SNAP, food stamps, for example, is out of those who are eligible is 90%. So it's not really it's not a disconnect in terms of people aren't interested in aid. It might be an outreach issue. We're really, really excited about this tool. You can look up, you can search your zip code, your county, your address, and it'll zoom you right into where that is, and that you can see how your community has essentially done for EBB enrollment. We're really excited for this tool to be used by people who are interested in digital inclusion to get a kind of a realistic snapshot on how their communities have performed, which I don't really like that word, but I can't think of another one, for EBB enrollment. And there's also another layer that you can toggle to that is terrestrial broadband. If you remember from our lightning rounds, Ryan Collins, who also works in Ohio, he's waving his hand back there, he mentioned something about Form 477 data, and that often it is an overstatement of connectivity, and that is true. In fact, that's just for anyone who doesn't know, Form 477 data is reported from an ISP to the FCC on who is served. And there's this sticky little part that says if one person is served in a census block, which can serve anywhere from 600 to 3,000 people, whole block is served, right? So it's an overstatement of connectivity. As we've heard from Robert, this data is tough. I think that's not always what we need. But we're working to maybe possibly integrate speed maps, because we're planning on updating this as it transitions to ACP2 with that expansion in eligibility, even though there's a drop in subsidy amount from $50 with EBB to $30 with ACP. Another interesting takeaway from that is if you find a lot of red, which means really high enrollment by eligibility on that map, a lot of those areas are tribal and indigenous American reservations, which I think is really fascinating. And again, this is a tool to find the answers. We don't have the answers, but very exciting, and hopefully, we were supposed to get business cards that had a QR code that you could scan, but they're being printed right now. We're picking them up at like 2, so I can give them to you after this talk, but they're not available yet. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I speak on behalf of a lot of people I know to say thank you, because that's a great tool for all of us. I think of that Form 477 data. I used to be a teacher for a lot of years, as if I gave you a test, told you to self-correct, and tell me what your grade was. It's kind of like that, right? So in a few minutes, I'm going to turn this over to you all for questions. If you have some, you might want to start lining up at the microphone. I'm going to ask one more, and then I'm going to go to audience questions. So what are the challenges in building economic mobility, and how should we consider overcoming them? What are the strategies or the steps that could be taken that could help to deal with this? It's a long-standing issue, right?
Who wants to go first?
I usually.
All right, no problem. Tons of challenges. The first one is curriculum development. I think we need to be mindful about what's in our course curriculum. It has to match with opportunities that are available. If we're preparing a changing workforce, then the curriculum has to match opportunities that are available. And how do we fix that? We invite employers to help influence our curriculum by telling us you should teach this because in 2 years or a year, these are the jobs that are going to be available. Another challenge is professional development, soft skills is a huge challenge, right? And so you're already dealing with a population that's far behind, right? Typically below or at the poverty level, typically underemployed or unemployed, typically unmet needs, et cetera. So one of the main problems is they don't know how to sell themselves. Even if you get them digitally literate and certified and employable, but how do you market yourself? How do you sell yourself? How do you sell yourself? Professional development. The other challenge is lack of support from private sector. I think that when you look at profits that are made from corporations and how they redistribute those funds to support NGOs or folks who are on the ground, there's a lot more that can be done. And I think that's, that goes without saying. Those are some of the challenges, and I don't want to take all of them because I want my fellow panelists to share some as well.
This is not really something that's necessarily LISC related, but I would point to a diminishing middle class as a really, and I know that almost seems like the reason why economic mobility is important, but I just recently learned that democracy can't really thrive without a middle class, right? And I think if you look back in history, that's well supported too. And we're seeing a lot of impositions, I think, on our democracy in the past 5 years than historically we have before in probably a century. So, and I think without good voter representation, with some voter suppression, I think this is one of the greatest issues that we might confront, is this unfair representation where companies may have more power than the government and can sway kind of the workings of the U.S. in ways that are unprecedented, I think. So that's one issue I'll earmark.
From my vantage point, the number one issue I see is lack of awareness. People don't know what they don't know. They hear a lot of stats, a lot of issues, but they don't tie it directly to digital exclusion. COVID helped in a way. It helped raise awareness big time. I think it sped us up like 3 to 5 years easily, but it's very laser focused on infrastructure. And people, planners and community leaders fail to see the forest, right? They're looking at the tree. And so lack of awareness is the number one issue we see in our work. Again, I'm talking about community regional level. And how do you address that? What we've learned is frame it around an issue that they do understand. And I'm gonna sound like a broken record here again, but when I mention, do your moms and pops have online presence? They go, no, they don't. Well, you're not digital inclusive. So we have frame it around what resonates with the audience you're working with the people you need their buy-in. Because from a community development perspective, there is the cave people, and no offense to cave people like literally, but these are the citizens against virtually everything. And so if you do not frame it around what it resonates with them, they will kill it on arrival, literally. What we found resonates is around competitiveness and workforce development, and ultimately quality of life.
Thank you. I'm going to add one, and those of you who know me won't be surprised by what it is, and that is trust. We can't move forward at all if there isn't a level of trust. And so for a lot of the work that we've done, we leverage the trust of people in the community. So who do folks already trust? They're faith-based leaders, often they're schools or libraries, community activists. So we really need to defer to them and to get the kind of support by asking questions and not offering solutions, right? What do you need? How can we be of a service to you? Help us help folks in your community. I think there's a big piece about trust that we often just don't realize is there, and that it's part of the reason people don't participate. And
Can I?
Roberto, I'm going to
Sorry.
use cave forever. I love that.
Can I add to that quickly? I just read a fantastic book from a European researcher called Digital Inequalities. And I would add to faith-based and churches, libraries, I would add bars and sports venues, really, because what she found in Europe is that even if you have access at the library, many people are intimidated by what a library means. What you're expected to do in a library, many people are not comfortable in that situation. So what she argues is we have to really push it out to wherever, meet the person where they're comfortable. We feel comfortable in a library, but not everybody does. And so that's kind of the related to the trust issue.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
ginormous.
Laura?
Is this on? Hello? I can't tell. It's on? Okay. I'm Laura Breeden. I'm the board chair of NDIA, but that doesn't mean my question is smart, so. So when I heard this was an economic development panel, I was thinking, oh, we're going to be talking about regional planning and bringing new businesses and trying to create entrepreneurs. But what I heard was it's all about skill building at the individual level. So, and maybe, you know, I just came to the wrong panel. I don't know. But can you talk a little bit about the more top-down, how do we support entrepreneurship? Once people have these skills, or are there jobs in our area? If there aren't any jobs in our area, why are we training people to do these things? So from the more classic economic development perspective, what are we trying to do here? And just bonus points if you can talk about how the new legislation and the new funding that's coming down the pike is going to impact that.
Great question.
Can I
Yes?
go ahead?
Go ahead, no, please.
Thank you,
you,
Laura.
Laura.
Very good question. In our work, what we do, we've noticed is that remote work. There was a lot in the media recently about the urban folks leaving, right, in droves and going to rural areas. Not necessarily, but what we have seen in our work is that if you empower and train folks, rural residents on remote work, they can remote work for somebody else and still remain in their community. So you're not necessarily attracting urban folks into the rural area. On the other second part of your question, Laura, we also work a lot with making sure that moms and pops and small businesses have an online presence and have the skills. Many times they're running a business. They don't have time to think about it. And many times they've been in business for many, many years. So they don't have necessarily the incentive to go online, believe it or not. So that's part of our work is how can you tie digital inclusion to economic development? It's focusing on the small folks, small business folks, and the entrepreneurs for sure.
That's great.
Can I add something too?
Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to add that I think the top-bottom approach might be why economic development has been tricky in this country so often. What I've really come to appreciate working with a lot of community-based organizations and partners, every single community is different. And it's so rare that these large frameworks that sound incredible work really, really well. Like the last time I could think of it is like Public Works for FDR, right? Like that's a large economic development framework that was successful. But I think it requires grassroots. I think it requires people in communities being able to do their own needs assessments, and I think it has to start. I think it has to start locally, and I think the top-bottom approach might be a flawed one.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. To stick with entrepreneurship, one of the new courses that Byte offers is entrepreneurship, especially with our returning citizens, right? We know that returning citizens, after they've paid their debt to society, they were probably in sales, but they were probably selling the wrong product, right? Which probably landed them right. But those skills are still transferable, right? It's okay to laugh at these great jokes. But no, the skills are still transferable, and we understand that. And so entrepreneurship is a clear route for us. We have a CEO program that we funnel our returning citizens right through to enhance their entrepreneurial skills. Now, as it relates to economic development, I think it's connecting opportunities with folks who need it, right? And bringing the corporate partners to the table so they can also understand. I think one of the voices that's missing are corporate partners, right? The folks who can actually hire and employ and make, right, and influence economic mobility. So bringing them into the conversation, helping them understand from our perspective, from our program participants' perspective, it's also about reframing, right? Reframing talent, reframing what it means to hire someone, reframing what talent traditionally looks like. It's gone are the days, and we're fastly approaching that. By 2025, 85 million jobs will be supplanted due to automation, AI, robotics, machine learning. And that means those 85 million jobs are tied to 85 million lives, right? The good news is this fourth industrial revolution will usher in about 97 million jobs by 2025. However, it doesn't account for the upskilling of this 85 million. Those 85 million will be completely phased out. 76% of African Americans by 2045 will be removed completely from participating in the workforce if we don't upskill them. 67% of Latinx will be completely removed or underprepared to participate in the future of work. So we can't get to economic mobility until we start with preparing our folks to experience the best possible route that will get them towards success. So economic mobility is also a generational thing, right? And so you're breaking generational curses. If your mother was poor, your grandmother was poor, a great-grand, it typically, if your mother didn't have a high school education, you're less likely to be upwardly mobile, right? These are facts. And so our goal is to make sure that we meet people where they are right in the beginning and show them that there's a clear pathway. It may not be a 4-year college degree like many of us have had. It may not be advanced studies. It may be tech certification. It may be being digitally literate. It may be learning how to use a computer in order to send your boss an email, right? It may be something as simple as that. But we have to start with the ground level. And until top-down doesn't really work in many situations, we need to do bottom-up.
That's right.
I would say too, Laura, one of the things the pandemic has done is it has created a lot of openings in the workforce, and we know this. And we've got a lot of folks who are looking for jobs. How do we begin to make those matches? And one of the more successful programs I've seen has been a short-term employment with someone coming out of one of our programs so that they can decide, I want to keep this person or I don't. And in some cases, they're nervous, and that gets them past their nervousness, right? Mm-hmm. We're just trying to help people feel more comfortable with a new pathway. And so some of the businesses have been much more likely to be open to that kind of approach. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Andy from Drexel University. We work a lot in West Philly with a very similar question around small businesses. You know, we look at a holistic approach to digital equity, and small businesses are part of that, especially those mom and pop shops. We've been assisting them, working with our business associations to help build websites for mom and pop shops right near Drexel University. But you know, getting them the time to actually learn those skills, that's really difficult for them to take the time to do that. But they were really hit hard when the pandemic was there because, you know, if they didn't have a website, or even if they had a website, they didn't know how to go online and sell things online, right? So that was a difficult thing. So I'm curious about any kind of training you're doing for that, or even around QuickBooks, you know, that kind of digital skills that are necessary for businesses. Because the other double whammy they got hit with is, you know, they're not getting enough customers and not making income, and all of a sudden, most of the cash businesses weren't reporting their income properly, so when they came down to some of the government assistance out there, they actually didn't qualify because their income wasn't correct. So it's kind of a double whammy they got hit with. So I'm just curious, what your thoughts are in supporting businesses with those digital skills, in general.
I think that's a great question. At Byte Back, what we've done is we've partnered with the Chamber of Commerce, DC Chamber of Commerce, to provide training to small businesses on Microsoft Office. We call it Computer Foundations, just basic Microsoft Office, telehealth, et cetera, online banking, and we provide that to small business owners, and we meet them where they are. So they don't necessarily have to come to us. We come to their location and provide that training. We've also adjusted, because we know, right, we can't sit in one place for too long, especially if you own a business. You're on the go. So we've had to adjust we had to make it palatable. So it can't just be 8 hours intensive training. So, you know, a couple of hours a day, et cetera, something that they can digest. But our goal is really to work with small businesses and provide them with this digital literacy training, so that way they can be full participants in the digital economy.
We have a program in partnership with Purdue Extension called Digital Ready Business, and it has multiple modules from planning your website to email marketing to we introduce business intelligence, which is AI in a way, but introduction. We don't expect them to leave with a BI, you know, a strategy. What I've learned in my experience from my days in Mississippi is not necessarily target the business owner. They're busy as it is. Target their employees, even if they're part-time employees, because many times they're the ones that may be a little bit more receptive to that. They may have the time. You will need the buy-in from the owner, obviously, but we tried reaching the owners, and we had such a hard time. So we then said, why don't we train their employees as well? And that got a little bit more traction as well.
I will mention that we do run Tech Goes Home for small businesses. It's open and it's free. And we teach folks how to organize, market, and sell online. When the pandemic hit, we all knew in our communities the businesses were struggling, but it wasn't just traditional businesses. It was faith-based organizations. It was a lot of different groups. And helping people figure out how to have an online presence was really important. So we did a lot of that work, gave a lot of the smaller churches in our community a device, taught them how to use it, and gave them a Wi-Fi hotspot. And the interesting thing for the faith-based folks was, for a lot of them, their congregations grew, as did their tithing. And so it was really about providing people the kind of opportunity to engage that during a pandemic they desperately wanted and needed. And so I think it's got to be flexible and fit the need of the particular organization, and that makes it a little bit trickier to resolve, because you've got to identify the needs of each organization.
Hi, I'm Donna from Computer Corps in Virginia, and Joe, I look forward to meeting you. We're your sister organization over in Virginia.
Pleasure.
So my question is kind of two data questions. Liz, I was interested in what you were saying about how people come into, admitting that that they're not tech savvy. We find we're a small nonprofit that just works with people who come to us because they say they're not tech savvy. So but we get a lot of referrals from the social service agencies, but they don't always tell us that they've referred people. So we get people from Department of Adult Rehabilitation Services, community service boards. They send them to us because we do the digital literacy. But in terms of data sharing, I'm just wondering what people have found in terms of best practice. I would like to know that you're sending so-and-so over to us so that we can then report back to you. Or say, wow, there seems to be a mental health component here that I can't talk about on email or text, and I can't even identify because I'm not an expert, but it would have been nice to know. And we take everybody very warm and welcoming, non-judgmental, and we do feel like people come to us because sometimes it is easier to say you're not tech savvy than to say you need food stamps or other type of help. We serve a very largely immigrant population, so there's also reasons that they don't go and seek other social services. They come to us, and then we're not always prepared there. And then a question for Joe on follow-up. You were talking about 3 to 5 years follow-up. What's your trick? What's your way of, do you use phone calls, emails, surveys? How do you follow up with somebody 3 years later? Thank you.
I'll take that away first. We are finding that data management is something that's lacking in a lot of these community action agencies or our partnerships. And that's kind of part of the capacity building piece that LISC has committed to. I think that, especially now with CARES, ARPA, and IJA, there's a lot of funding available for these types of organizations, but they lack bandwidth, and they might lack the ability they might not have the tools to accurately track outputs, which is really important for receiving a grant, or, so I think data management is a struggle, and I'm not all the way surprised that there's not that clear line of communication. So I would say that I hope it develops, but I agree with you that it is an ongoing issue, and it's one that we've also recognized within our organization, and the mental health piece of it, and that, it's stigma, right? So I think what's really beautiful about digital literacy is this removal of stigma for a lot of things. I think it was the digital equity champion yesterday, I'm blanking on her name too, that referred to that cartoon of the dog and said, but nobody knows I'm a dog on this computer, right? Like, that's really empowering to an extent. And I think telehealth does the same thing of removing that stigma. And I think stigma and these very human and emotional things kind of get interwoven into a lot of these issues with management. I don't know if that's really like a good answer, but I just agree that it's a problem, and I'm not really sure how to solve it, but we've seen that too.
One of the things that we've done initially when someone applied to it, well, first question. Initially, when someone would apply to one of our programs, the process was laborious. I mean, you had to fill in, et cetera. No one has time to sit there through. I know I get tired if I have to go to page 2. So I can only imagine folks who have more issues having issues. So what we've done was we've created a pre-application, and it's very simple. Name, email, phone number, zip code, agency you're being referred by, right? And so that way now, and we have a list of those referral partners and or other if they're not listed. And also please rate your digital literacy skills, right? Do you think you're an expert, novice, et cetera? So now we take that and we work with Salesforce. We can create campaigns around it. We can find out where they come from. We can actually double back and talk to the referral partners and say, hey, did you refer this person? And last but not least, we can also communicate our progress and our impact to the referral partners, right? So if they know that someone who comes from agency A gets into Byte back and their life is transformed, they're more likely to send us more people, right? And if we inform them that if they come through Byte back, here's the difference. These 7 people came from this agency, and here's how we've been able to make them whole. So that's one little trick that you can use to have the program participant self-select and tell you where they're coming from. The second part with follow-up, sustainable impact, right? All of our organizations, we really have to be focused on sustainable impact. What are we doing today, and how, and what difference is it going to make? We use surveys. We also engage our alums, right? So we've been around for 25 years. So that means thousands of people have come through Byte Back's doors. And you have not because you ask not. And so we make sure that we empower our alums to do that research for us. We also ask them, where are you right now? Did you take more certifications outside of what Byte Back was offering? If so, what are those? And if they are, would you like to be a guest instructor? Because we want to teach that as well. So it's through surveys, it's through follow-up, and it's also through creating this robust alumni or past program participant model where you're constantly following up. Here's the other thing. We also, because there's that WIFM, right? What's in it for me? For the alumni to participate and share this information, we also tell them, hey, we will share career opportunities with you that our corporate partners. We'll also share data. We'll create a repository that you can access at all times to give you information, et cetera. But it's through surveys and engaging our alums. Hopefully that answers your question, and look forward to working with you.
So we have 10 minutes left. So we have 2 people in line. So if you could keep your question short, and we'll answer quickly, so that we can take care of both questions,
Consider it
okay?
done.
Okay, I hope it's a short question. There are hundreds of thousands of job opportunities now and coming up for technicians and for people who will install all of this equipment and then maintain it and fix it, both wired and wireless equipment. And so that's a huge workforce development opportunity. It's one that takes digital literacy skills, but it also takes hands-on skills. It doesn't take a 4-year degree, and it pays really well. And I'm wondering if in your work, and there's jobs all over the country for it, and so I'm wondering if in your work you see or are engaged in any programs that support that kind of work.
So in Indiana, Karen, the Broadband office engaged with Ivy Tech, which is the community colleges, to launch a fiber installer certification. I know it's very narrow, but the issue has come up and continues to be a big, big issue. But definitely, the 4-year degree it's full of myth, I think, in a way, because I think that we're overlooking a substantial portion of our workforce if we focus only on the 4-year degree. So Indiana has that. However, the best program I've seen is in Wisconsin. I don't know if there's somebody from Wisconsin here, but they've done a phenomenal job with providers, community colleges, and universities together to develop this program to churn out these technicians as fast as possible.
We currently don't have that, but great idea. So, as I think about, great idea. And what's important about these types of conferences and these conversations is we get to learn best practices and things that work at other places that we can, operationalize for scale and optimize for scale. So that's fantastic. It's not an avenue that we even thought of, honestly, but it's a changing workforce. We're really concerned about that future of work, that 2025 and beyond opportunities. After these folks have already installed them, what do they do now, right? Are we training them and upskilling them so that way, once they install it, now they can actually maintain it and they know how to, the back-end programming, et cetera. I think that's a more powerful model, but great idea, and we're going to borrow that.
Thank you, Karen.
Good morning, afternoon. Couple of things, just to Karen's question. I can't think of the name of the organization right now, but I will get it to you. But one of the things that they do that anybody can do is after they go through a certain amount of training with their folks, they have partnerships with temp agencies. And then folks do a stint with employers where they get on the job, experience. And that gives them, is able to help them build out their resume, and it often leads to jobs, at an entry level. So I've seen a number of organizations that are doing workforce development incorporate that aspect very successfully. My question is, I am looking for a program that has used beauty shops and barber shops to communicate information. We would like to do something like that in California, and my contact in California isn't there any longer to do that, but I'm looking for somebody who has actually worked with, that as an outreach stream, and would love to hear of any program that that has done that. I've seen it done around public health, but would like to do it around digital skills and adoption.
We actually have, I did when I was in Boston, signed people up for low-cost internet and really worked with folks in the barber shops and in the nail salons, and we brought donuts, right? Come have a donut and listen to me. I'm going to talk to you about something, and I can't tell you how many folks we got signed up through that. It was pretty impressive. And the other place is laundromats are a great place to have those kinds of conversations. But it was actually incredibly powerful. There is a gentleman, Craig Settles, who actually has a way to empower barbershops to do some quick interventions to see if somebody is likely to have a stroke or not. So there are all these great things, and he's doing those in barbershops, right? What a great place to start a project and to engage with folks in the communities, yeah.
I think it's powerful. I think that's really powerful. If we're really interested in closing the digital divide, we have to meet people where they are. We have to go to the Walmarts, we have to go to the churches. We can't put an ad on Facebook or on Twitter or on LinkedIn and expect them to see it, right? If they're digitally illiterate, right, we have to bridge that gap. Meeting people where they are, grassroots efforts is always the approach. And I want to finish with building community trust is also important, right? If they don't recognize you on the other side of that door when you knock, they're not going to open the door, right? If you don't have a demonstrated history of actually supporting a particular community, they're not interested, right? There are a lot of more folks who can take advantage of EBB and other projects, but they just don't trust it. I don't want that government internet because I don't want them to spy. I mean, you hear it all, right? Anybody, right? So you hear it all. But if we build community trust, the walls fall down.
So I'll give you a quick example of that. We actually hired a gentleman to work for us who is a pastor, and he is in the community regularly. He sat down with some folks to sign folks up for free internet for low-income families, and he signed 22 people up in a day. And the people sitting next to him struggled to sign up one because they knew who he was when he called. That really makes a difference. Okay, I'm going to ask folks real quick question. We have 3 minutes left. So the question that we had planned to end with, which may be a little too hard for this 3 minutes, was really, can you give folks just one piece of advice on some step they might take in their community or some person or organization they should connect with in order to improve the economic opportunities for the folks that we serve?
I'll do it in less than a minute. So, Byte is going to be launching our second Saturday service project. So every second Saturday, we're going to be out in the community with our Byte Back shirts, et cetera, so they can actually see us do work, whether it's picking up trash or you name it, delivering groceries, et cetera. The other thing that I think is important, oh, I'm drawing a blank. The other thing I think is important, under a minute. I'm going to come back to it. I don't want to waste it.
Well, as I've mentioned before, study who your audience is and what resonates with them, and frame it around that. At the end of the day, we want to be digital inclusive, period. And it's how you frame it that really makes the difference from the get-go. That would be my advice.
I think something that I've learned from LISC, and I think it's such an equitable model that I really agree with, is relinquish all control to the organizations that are meeting those people. As much as it's tempting to try to control how people, for example, at Rural LISC do a digital navigator program, it is most successful when you just give all. I think it's a creative liberty, and I think having the ability to have a flexible grant timeline is also really great. What I've learned that is so empowering is so many of our partners don't start seeing clients up to 4 to 5 months into their 8-month grant period. And it's because they're being thoughtful, right? And it's because they have the opportunity to be thoughtful because we're there offering technical assistance. It's not like a government grant where it's just like, here's your money, give us your outputs in a year, right? It's ongoing. We're there whenever they need us, but we just give them the power because that's how it should be done, and that's why the program is so effective. So if my one piece of advice is let go of control. I think trust is a two-way street, right? If you want trust in a community, you give trust too. You have to give that trust to that organization, and you'll watch it flourish. It's really empowering. I think it's really beautiful. I think that's my piece.
Go ahead.
I remember, 30 seconds.
Okay.
I remember. So, so partnerships, right? We're all fighting the same challenge. But imagine if we combine our resources and we build a consortium where we'll go at this together. We're more likely to solve this problem a lot faster. So find other organizations, like-minded, mission-minded organizations who are doing the same work, and combine resources, combine energy, combine teams, and go after this. We're applying for a DOES grant with 5 other organizations. Now, granted, it's only $250K, right? You're thinking, what, 5 divided by? Yes, but the idea is, let's see if we can at least do this. Can we do this? Can we combine resources and energy, et cetera, to solve this problem? And the answer is yes, it's happening swimmingly. So partner with others. Don't go at this alone. If you go at it alone, it's on you. There are other people in your community right around the corner who are doing the same work. Combine efforts, solve the problem faster.
So, and I would say to that, the time to build a network is before you need the network, right? And so, 2 things. First one is, let's tell Liz she doesn't have imposter syndrome. And let's thank all of our panelists. That was really an interesting conversation.